awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. And for all the other folks that we have here on the call, we're really excited to share more about the work that both Grace and Tony do in their roles, and specifically other resources you might be able to have in finding a job after college or even post-college as well. So I wanted to go over just a couple of the housekeeping items we have on the screen before we get started. First off, this session is being recorded, including the chat, but we cannot see or hear you unless, of course, we'll have an option at the end for question and answer. And if you'd like to be unmuted, then we can do that. Also, as I mentioned, introduce yourself in the chat if you haven't already. Thanks for the folks that have done that. And then we'll have plenty of opportunities for questions throughout our webinar here today and to address them towards the end. So you can use the Q&A function or also the chat function, and we'll go through that toward the end. So I've already introduced myself. I wanted to allow an opportunity for my colleague Julia here with us to introduce herself as well.
Hey everyone, nice to have you all on this call with us tonight. My name is Julia. I'm the Advocacy and Outreach Fellow at FRN National, and I will be facilitating our question and answer section after Grace and Tony both go through their presentations. So if at any point you have questions during this presentation, you can use the chat or you can use the Q&A function, and I'll make sure that I capture them and bring them back up at the end of our conversation.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Julia. And before we dive into introducing both Grace and Tony, our panelists today, I wanted to go ahead and launch a poll and hear about from you all, from our audience here today. Since this is a webinar focused on finding a job after college, we're curious of what kind of level you might be within college or if otherwise. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll now. You should be able to see it on your screens. If you could just answer that, maybe what year you are, if you're a staff advisor on the call, if you're an alumni, or if you fall into another category. And we'll leave that up just for a little bit. Just curious to see what people have to say. Alrighty, thanks folks for addressing this. I'm going to end the poll and go ahead and share the results so we can see. So it looks like about 50% are seniors on the call, which makes sense. We have a junior on the call, totally makes sense. FRN alumni, awesome. And another group, awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that. So now, before we dive into each of Grace and Tony's presentations, I just wanted to briefly introduce them and allow them to introduce themselves and share a little bit. So first I'll introduce Tony. Tony's the director of the Bill Emerson National Hunger Fellowship Program for the Congressional Hunger Center, a friend of FRN. Tony provides overall strategy and manages the day-to-day operations of the program at the Hunger Center, which provides opportunities for fellows to gain experience and expertise in anti-poverty and anti-hunger public policy. Tony will be talking about a lot of that work today. Prior to the Hunger Center, Tony taught American history, government, and politics at the high school level. He's also worked in government a bit as the political appointee at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and then has also served as a congressional aide on the Agriculture Committee of the U.S. House of Representatives. So really excited to hear from Tony today. Tony, I wanted to allow you an opportunity to speak to our audience briefly before we get dived in.
Hi, everyone. It's good to virtually meet you. Glad to be here today. I will be honest with you, I'm a little on fumes right now. At the Hunger Center, we are in the midst of recruiting for our next class of fellows. So we are doing 2-hour-long group interviews. So I'm a little tired, but very excited to be here and glad to take part in this. So thank you so much for the invitation.
And thank you, Tony, for taking the time. And you're really in the thick of it, of exactly what we're talking about here today, recruitment and job opportunities, et cetera. So thank you. So now I'll also briefly introduce you, Grace, to our audience here today. Grace is an FRN alumni of our network. Grace was introduced to the importance of food recovery in her college dining hall, where students organize the recovery of dining hall food 6 days a week across the campus. And this work inspired Grace to continue her work within food recovery at the Berkely Food Network as the food recovery program coordinator. So Grace, I'll provide an opportunity for you to share what you're excited to share more about today with our audience.
Yeah, so I, not too long ago, was an FRN student myself, job hunting sort of this past March. So I'm super excited to be here with all of you, connect with some current students, and sort of provide any insights I can from my own experience job searching just a little while ago.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Grace. And I will add that both Grace and Tony here started their roles within the context of a pandemic. We want to recognize that graduating or looking for jobs within a pandemic can be really scary. And so we'll be talking a little bit throughout our time here today about what that might look like for you all as well and what resources we can provide. So in terms of the flow of our webinar here today, I'll turn it over to Tony here shortly, who will share more about his work at the Hunger Center and his role as a hiring manager at the Hunger Center, any tips and advice that he has for you all. And then we'll spend some time a little bit in between transitioning, and then Grace will spend some time sharing about her work at the Berkely Food Center, and then also just experience as an FRN alumni, as she said. And then finally at the end, as Julia mentioned, she'll have an opportunity to share any questions that you all have from our audience here today, and then we'll get wrapped up with next steps. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen so Tony, you can have the opportunity to share your screen.
Okay, so now I have the power. This is always scary. All right, let me see if I can do this. All right, where am I? Oh, here we go. I think that's the easiest I've ever done this. Now, let me just see if I can.
Yep, we can see it.
Do slideshow. Okay, awesome. That was like the easiest transition I think I've ever had since I've done a few of these. So I appreciate that. So again, my name is Tony. I am with the Congressional Hunger Center, and I'm just gonna give you an overview of the Hunger Center and the fellowship, and at the end provide some resources for where we post about the fellowship. So the Congressional Hunger Center is a 501c3 organization. Our mandate is to make hunger and poverty a high priority among policymakers both at the state and national level. We seek to train and inspire leaders as change agents to end hunger, and we advocate for public policies to create a food secure world. We were established in 1993. In 1994, we had our first class of Emerson Hunger Fellows. So the Emerson program, we run really two big fellowship programs. The Emerson program is the domestic nutrition side of the program. So we deal with hunger and poverty issues in the United States. In 2001, the National Hunger Program was established, and the Leland program is mainly for graduate students, but that deals with international feeding issues and hunger issues. And then in 2018, there was the established of the Zero Hunger Internship Program, and that is for current college students and also recent graduates. And we are right now supporting the 27th class of Emerson Fellows and recruiting for the 28th class of Fellows. So a little bit about our theory of change. So at the Hunger Center, if you're a fellow, we're going to give you the fundamental context and knowledge on a variety of anti-poverty, anti-hunger programs. We also provide our fellows with critical skills, both for their field and policy placements. And I'll talk a little bit about what the field and policy placements are. We also mentor the fellows both through the Hunger Center itself and through the field and policy placements. There's a wide and vibrant network of hunger alums, of Emerson alums who have graduated through the program. I believe there are about 500 right now. And really, what we want our fellows to do once they graduate from the fellowship is to go on and become change agents in whatever, on whatever career path that they choose post-fellowship. Because at the end of the day, we want to have food and nutrition security for all. So what are our goals? So again, fellows will make tangible contributions to their field and policy placements in the short term. They will also get leadership skills. So not only do our fellows get a firm grounding in anti-hunger, anti-poverty policy, but we also provide them with leadership skills. And we are really, really, really proud of our cohort model, which basically means we want the fellows to learn from each other. So those are our short-term goals. In the medium term, we look at the fellowship sort of as a bridge between what is going on the ground in the community-based organizations and the national policy organizations. So fellows in an 11-month period will get experience in both in the state, local, and regional level, and then at the national level. And then our long-term goal, again, is to just help the fellows to determine how they best want to make change in their lives. So what do we do about when we're talking about over the program year, looking at the root causes of hunger? One of the hallmarks of the Emerson program is the fact that it focuses on the root causes of hunger and looks particularly at these issues through a racial equity lens. One of our hallmarks is that we want to find out why communities of color are disproportionately affected by issues of hunger and poverty. So we really ground the fellows in looking at those issues through that lens, through our trainings. And then we want to look at what are the solutions for changing. So what are the changes, again, at the local, state, and regional levels? Who makes the change? And how do you attain the influence and power to help change occur? This is our leadership capabilities model right here. Again, as I mentioned, we don't just ground our fellows in anti-hunger, anti-poverty policy, but we also look at developing them as future leaders. So as you can see here, we have the three overall general categories of developing selves, creating change, and leading with others. And then on the outside of that wheel, we get a little bit more in depth and look at each of those different categories of change. And this right here sums up the fellowship. So it's kind of like the circle you see here. So we provide the technical skills, and the technical skills are the grounding in anti-hunger, anti-poverty policy, as well as the experience of working at field and policy placements. Then you have the leadership capabilities that we provide the fellows with, and then the cohort learning amongst themselves. It's a circle, and then we hope once they leave the fellowship that they will become agents of change. So what is our structure? It's an 11-month commitment. We have field placements where the fellows are placed with community-based organizations. And then there's policy placements where they're placed with national policy organizations. And they do a wide variety of work. Some fellows are engaged in qualitative and quantitative research. They're engaged in program design and implementation, advocacy, and communications. And I'm going to show you the fellowship here at a glance. So field placements start in September. So the current class of fellows started in September of last year. And actually, they will be done with their field placements tomorrow, interestingly enough. So they've been working at their field organizations since then. This year, with the pandemic, they've actually been virtual for the most part. So the current class has 19 fellows, and of the 19 fellows, 17 have been working virtually. 2 have worked at their field sites, 1 in Texas and 1 in Oregon. So after tomorrow, they'll be done at their field sites, and then next month, it says February, but it should March. So next month, they will start at their policy placements here in Washington, DC, but none of the fellows are going to be actually at the physical locations for their policy sites. They will be working virtually. And what has been interesting is that all of both the field placements and policy placements have to submit work plans, and the work plans basically outline what they will have their fellows engaged in. And because of the pandemic, there's been a ton of focus on providing research and advocacy dealing with hunger and nutrition, hunger, poverty, and nutrition issues, and how those issues have been affected by the pandemic. So our field placements, again, those are organizations at the local, state, and regional levels, and the fellows can do advocacy, outreach, and analysis. And this will show you where our fellows' field sites are located. So you can see Washington, Oregon, California, Texas, Arkansas, Illinois, Alabama, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts. In a non-pandemic year, the fellows would actually be living in those states. So they would have been living in each of those states from September until this month, and then they would move to DC. But again, as I mentioned, they're all working for the most part virtually. And this will provide you with the organizations or the field organizations that they have been working with. So the policy placements, the work can include research, outreach, and advocacy, public education projects, and projects supporting national initiatives and campaigns. And a lot of the plans this year are going to be focused on what kinds of initiatives administration will be coming up with. And this gives you an idea of some of the organizations that we fellows have worked with in the past and are currently going to be working with. So this year we are going to have fellows who are placed at Feeding America, FRAC, not at CAP, but a couple at CLASP, the National Women's Law Center. We have a fellow going to USDA, and not this year the National Farm to School Network, but hopefully next year. So what are we looking for when we get applicants to the program? Well, we're looking for individuals who are committed to ending hunger and poverty in the United States, individuals who have an ability to adapt in challenging situations. I try to impart on the applicants that this is not an easy program. It is an 11-month commitment, and you have to be flexible and adaptable because if you think about it, in 1 year, you are going to have basically two different jobs, 2 different supervisors, 2 different work plans. And in a non-pandemic year, you would also be moving. So there is a lot to this program. It is not easy. You have to manage personalities as well as managing your professional work with the organizations. So it's not an easy fellowship, but it's definitely worthwhile. You need to have an enthusiasm for learning from a wide range of individuals. Also, you have to have a really strong commitment to racial equity and social justice. It is something we ask on the application. Again, it's a definite focus point for us, and we really are looking for our applicants who have lived experiences with hunger and poverty, because we want the people who are experiencing hunger and poverty to be at the center. We want to hear their voices because we understand that, unfortunately, particularly at the national policy level, so many of those voices are not at the table. So it is very important for people with lived experience a seat at the table so their voices can get heard. We also look for candidates who have demonstrated leadership skills. But there is no one. I've had applicants ask, is there any one thing that you're looking for? There really isn't any one thing that we're looking for. We're just looking for like a combination of qualities. And definitely, I will say one of the strongest is personality. It's folks who are very collaborative, because we do really believe in the cohort model. So we're just looking for people who like to work with people and are really people, if that makes sense. All right. So what do we provide? We provide our fellows with financial package that is location specific. So the financial package uses the MIT Living Calculator, or excuse me, living wage calculator, and fellows are placed and comes up with a financial package based on that. It's designed to support fellows' living expenses, offset the cost of housing. Again, we provide leadership development training, technical assistance, advising. There are tons of professional development opportunities. There you get access to a great cohort of alums. And it really is, the fellowship does provide a lot of networking opportunities that will open doors down the road. One of the things, having worked in DC for so long and having worked in this space, I always try to tell fellows or people who are looking for jobs, never turn down, like in a virtual environment, you know, make as many contacts as you have as many virtual chats as you can have, because to be honest, when this job opened up, I was able to get in the door through someone I know, because I think a lot of times we think that, oh, I have the qualifications, I can just apply and I will get in the door that way. It is, particularly in DC. I had a friend tell me that it is the ultimate corporate town, and it really is. So much of this depends on who you know. And sometimes you will think that, oh, if I'm looking for a job, but I'm not going to just tell anyone. Tell everyone. Like, send your everywhere. Do not be afraid to send your resume to places you don't even, or people you don't think might not be able to help, because you will be surprised at how many people really want to help you succeed. And particularly, it's really challenging now in terms of the pandemic to make those connections. So just be intentional in that. And again, through LinkedIn or however you want to connect with people, let people know that you're looking, because that will open up opportunities for you in places that you might not have thought to look. And the host sites will provide the work plan, the day-to-day supervision. They provide office space and a local community in the fellows field placement area. This is just a little bit about the Leland program. Leland is different. It's a 2-year commitment. So you have a 1-year field placement in a developing country, and then a 1-year placement at a policy placement, usually in the headquarters. You can see there that what the fellows work on. I'm not as familiar with the Leland program. That's not under my purview. So that's a little bit about the Leland program. And then this is a little bit about the Zero Hunger internship. And again, that is for college students. And if you've graduated in December, you can apply, or if you're graduating in the spring, you can apply for this program. And again, you can see it's the difference with the Zero Hunger internship is that it's kind of like a little bit of Leland and a little bit of Emerson, because you can either work on domestic hunger issues or international. The woman that runs that program told me to make sure that you know that you can apply to the program up until, I think she said applications were due February 22nd. That is our timeline there. So our fellowship, this was for the last class of fellows, opened on October, closed in January. Right now we're in the midst of group interviews. After we go through this group interview process in March, in June, the fellows will receive notifications about their field sites. We'll be making rolling offers to candidates before that, like March to May. And then the fellows in a non-pandemic year, they'd be coming to DC for their 10-day field training. Don't know how that will look next year, but anyway, in late August it's field training, and then September they begin their field work. And this is the timeline for the Leland program. It's different. And then here's some resources. When you're looking, we post about the fellowship on Idealist, on Good Food Jobs, LinkedIn, ngobox.org, Global Jobs. If you're interested in the Leland program, and then Datebook. And then I can't see the chat, but if there are any questions, I am available for any questions that you might have. And thank you so much for your time. I'm sorry if I rambled a little bit. Again, I'm so on fumes right now that I'm just happy that I'm awake and can put somewhat coherent sentences together.
Thank you, Tony. Really appreciate it. Yeah, I didn't see any questions coming through yet, but we'll have plenty of time at the end for questions as well. I definitely encourage, if you have questions about just advice around like what to look for and everything, since we have Tony here with us, and specifically since he's in the thick of it, recruiting folks now of like what he's looking for and in the work that in the applications that he sorts through, etc. So I definitely encourage you to ask. So now I'll turn it over to Grace. Definitely ask any questions that you have in the chat and in the Q&A in the interim, and then we'll close up with questions towards the end. But now Grace will talk a little bit about her experience as an FRN alumni and moving into her role at the Berkely Food Network specifically. So Tony, if you don't mind, stop sharing your screen, and then Grace can go ahead and share hers. And specifically, Grace. Great, thank you. And Grace's experience, yeah, like I said, as an FRN alumni, and then now specifically in the food recovery work. When I first met Grace, I was like, that sounds like it's a perfect job to pop you in straight out of college, out of working from FRN. So I'll turn it to you, Grace.
Awesome. Can you guys see that?
I cannot.
Okay, let me.
Yep, there we go.
Cool. Yeah, so as Cassie said, I'm going to sort of give sort of my timeline and my journey going from just beginning, freshman, sophomore in college, getting involved in food recovery, and then my journey until now, working as the food recovery manager at the Berkely Food Network. So first, I'm going to talk about my journey to becoming a volunteer, some internships that I did along the way during the summers, sort of what I used as my tactics while I was job hunting, as Cassie said, during COVID, and then what my current role at Berkely Food Network looks like on sort of a day-to-day basis, and some of the skills that I still use that I developed being a student leader working with FRN, and then some tips and insights from my own journey and how you can find your own way in your own job search. So this is on the left, a volunteer fair at Carleton where I went to school. And that was how I first got involved in Food Recovery Network. I just saw some other older students tabling when I was a freshman. And the way it works at my college is sort of first-time volunteers are the ones who are the packaging food in the dining hall. So our pitch was always like, it's just a 30-minute commitment, and you can sort of get introduced to what food recovery is. You get to be in the dining halls, and it's a perfect opportunity to sort of see how the food that you're eating every night can be packaged and recovered, and then go to a different community partner in the Northfield community, which is where my school was. So that's how I first got involved, and then became a student leader my sophomore year. And the way our program works is we have about 6 to 7 program directors who share different responsibilities of our FRN chapter. So my main responsibilities over the years were managing our community partnerships. So I would be emailing and working with different organizations in Northfield. Some ones that we worked with were churches in the area, educational institutions, both like daycares, elementary school and high school, and then some shared living settings. So a lot of my day-to-day role as that coordinator was just communicating and talking with whoever was leading the food service operations at those organizations. And I think that was sort of my first intro into the fact that a lot of these organizations, when you're doing food recovery work, everyone is doing so many different things. They're all pulled in a lot of different directions. But everyone is super grateful to receive this like wonderful quality surplus food that dining halls are able to offer, and it just makes their jobs a lot easier a lot of the times, because we're able to provide them ready-made food that then they can serve their clients. And then the photo on the right is some of my fellow program directors when we attended NFRD in 2019, which seems so long ago, but totally recommend going as a student or alumni if you ever get the opportunity, hopefully in 2021. But to say that I think any of these sort of like opportunities where you're able to collaborate and network with fellow people in the FRN network are super beneficial, just because every chapter is so different. So I think there's so much to learn from different students involved in food recovery, and then also as a wonderful networking opportunity, because I think a lot of people passionate about food recovery end up bringing a lot of those same goals when they're searching for jobs and when they're sort of finding their first jobs in their careers. So I think all of those connections are super important and can be good lasting connections as you're entering your own job search. And then I just want to move forward into some of the opportunities that I pursued in my internship experiences. So I think this was between my sophomore and junior year. So I had sort of been more involved with food recovery sort of on the leadership level, and I was starting to think about the ways that anti-hunger work and food recovery were related to each other. And I think it's oftentimes much harder to find things sort of on the sustainability and environmental side of the food waste side for jobs. So I ended up working with the lunch bus program at the Greater Chicago Food Depository. So the way that program works is basically there are 4 of these lunch buses that you see in the photo, and they go around to 24 different sites in Chicago throughout the summer. So for students who would typically be receiving free and reduced lunch during the school year, and since they're not able to receive those during the summer, these lunch buses sort of are a stopgap way to provide free lunches at different community areas in Chicago. So this one, I believe, is at sort of like a community gym, but a lot of other ones are at libraries, schools, things like that, places that are community spaces that are open during the summer. So this was sort of my first professional opportunity working in the anti-hunger space, and it got me thinking sort of this is, you know, a really creative and effective way to get food out into the community. But these were also different like packaged lunches that we were getting in new shipments every day, and we were required to hand out 1 packaged lunch and then also with a milk on the side because of USDA like health requirements for a nutritious balanced meal, which totally makes sense. But of course, some students maybe are lactose intolerant and they don't want a milk, things like that. But there wasn't really any flexibility that we could offer. So we were required to hand out, you know, the milk on the side of every meal. And then we also were having those new shipments come in every day. So even if there were leftover meals at the end of each day, because we weren't able to sort of predict how many kids would be coming to the lunch bus at each site. So there was also a lot of wasted food that ended up happening. So that sort of got me thinking at the end of that summer, sort of how can we tackle these issues of food waste and hunger in tandem rather than having one sort of lead to another. So that sort of leads me into one of the next job opportunities that I had. So I studied abroad in New Zealand on sort of a sustainability and Indigenous perspectives course. And in that work, one of my internship experiences was working with a youth development organization who had a community kitchen program. And I was sort of working on their food recovery program there as well. So what you see here is 2 sort of meal spreads that we put together mostly with recovered food from different grocery stores in the area. And I like to bring up this example because I don't think, for me at least, that I would think a youth development organization sort of has food recovery on their radar, or that would be like a job opportunity at one of those organizations. But just because they're working with so many youth and different organizations, they ended up having the ability to have a community kitchen space where they cook meals and charge reduced costs if you want a catering meal for different events you're hosting. And then it also provides an opportunity for students and youth to sort of get in the kitchen and see firsthand learning about our food system, and also learning valuable sort of cooking skills. So I think this is a really cool just thing to keep in mind, that food recovery jobs aren't always in the most straightforward spaces, but there's a lot of different, avenues into that work. And then that brings me to Berkely Food Network, where I actually interned my final year before my senior year of college. And this was actually, like Tony was saying, something that I just heard about through some of my common connections. So my aunt actually is like a school teacher in Berkeley, and one of her former students, their mom, was connected with the Berkely Food Network, and I just hopped on a phone call with her. And she shared the email of the executive director, and I just reached out via email and said, I'm really passionate about food recovery, and I'm looking for a internship over the summer. And at Carleton, they offer stipends so that you can find a nonprofit, and if they're willing to host you as an intern, they'll give you a living stipend and sort of fund your summer internship opportunity. So I think that made it a much easier sell on my part as well, to say, like, I have my own funding, I'd love to just come work with you and support your food recovery program. So I ended up interning with them, and they were just getting off the ground, actually. So the warehouse that I'm in right now, we were moving into in the summer of 2019, and sort of just working out of shared storage space from one of our senior centers that we worked with. But that was sort of my first introduction into their work. And my main role then was to sort of make food recovery policies and procedures so that in the coming months they could pilot the program. So I was definitely drawing from a lot of the food safety things that I'd learned in my time with Food Recovery Network, and just my experience with the logistics and organization of that program. So I think that really helped me recontextualize and realize that all the things that sort of you learn day to day working with Food Recovery Network, not everyone has those experiences, and that's actually really a unique sort of base of knowledge that you should sort of, I think, view as an asset. And I think it's a really big sell for a lot of different organizations, especially as places are launching and getting their food recovery programs off the ground. So you already have more experience than a lot of people, which is really exciting. Yeah, so after that internship experience, I went back to school and worked with our food recovery chapter for another year. And at this time, we were sort of pursuing new avenues of food rescue. So on the left-hand side is we started getting sort of the prepared packaged foods from cafes in our dining hall, and realized that sort of those prepackaged items with labels on them were really beneficial for some of our clients, because it's a lot less stigmatizing to receive that than sort of dining hall packaged food in a container. And then we also began working with our local grocery stores to recover food from them twice a week. So that really allowed us to offer more produce and sort of whole raw ingredients to clients. And we worked directly with our food pantry in Northfield to do that. So that was a really cool collaboration. And then they were able to hand out that food in their food pantry, but we were able to offer them sort of our fleet of vehicles through the college, and then also student support with the volunteers, just because a lot of their volunteer base was sort of older individuals who weren't so interested in doing these early morning, very like heavy lifting pickups from the grocery store. So those were sort of two collaborations beyond just the dining hall that we worked on. And I think for me, it sort of got me thinking about all the different places in our food system that there's food waste beyond just the dining hall, and was a really good sort of mindset for me going into now my role as the food recovery manager here. So that leads me to sort of the mindset that I had when I was entering my job search, and also the sort of shifts to our food system and the job market with COVID-19. So this was right around when I was applying for jobs in March and so forth and so on. Of course, we all know there was a huge increase in food insecurity with disruptions to jobs and different things. And then also wanted to highlight that there were a lot of sort of fears that the global food supply was being disrupted. So I think really highlighting the fact that these two issues of hunger and food waste and food shortages really go hand in hand. And then this one is a little unique to California, but there's a Senate bill in California called SB 1383 that basically what it says is that all of the organic waste in California by 2020 has to be reduced by 50% going to the landfill. So that could be composting, but the bill specifically says that by 2025, 20% of edible food that's currently being put in the landfill needs to be recovered to edible food recovery organizations. So I think it's a pretty exciting time in California and a precedent sort of for the rest of the US that on a legislative level, people are starting to think about food recovery and the impacts of really reducing food waste and how that can be really beneficial on a state and a national level. So that was sort of the landscape that I was thinking about when I was entering the job market. So I thought it shouldn't be that hard to find a job in food recovery because we're sort of in this climate where we don't have enough food and there's so much more need. But what I found was it's really not that easy to find these jobs because people are using such different sort of like keywords, and food recovery can be a part of so many different jobs, but I think sort of the job market hasn't shifted yet to the fact that like food recovery manager is a pretty rare job that you're going to find. That might be like 50% of another role at an anti-hunger organization or like a youth organization. So I actually had kept in touch over the months with my previous internship at BFN, and with COVID, the food recovery program really grew, and they were able to, with increased funding, sort of carve out a food recovery specific role, and that's how I ended up working here. But that's just to say that I think like networking, staying in touch can lead to a lot of really good job opportunities. And then I just want to talk a little bit about sort of my day-to-day responsibilities and what I bring from my time at FRN. So I think the biggest one that sticks out for me is just relationship building. So I think that could be in the context of working with food recovery donors, working with people like community organizations who accept food. And I think food is just such a personal thing. And if you gain the trust of anyone who is willing to donate or people who are willing to accept your food, I think just building that relationship is the first most important step. And that totally translates from any of the work that you're doing as a student in FRN. And then also collaboration and sharing ideas. I think food recovery at its core is a pretty simple idea of just finding any surplus food and figuring out where can we, who can we give this to so that it doesn't go into the landfill or to the compost. And I think as much as you can sort of talk to other people in the food recovery space, rather than reinventing the wheel, I think there are already so many excellent like logistic models and different ways that people are currently tackling ideas. And then the last thing that I think totally comes in from FRN as well is the different ways that you like track poundage and communicate your data and the work that you do. That totally translates like on any scale and in any role. And then more broadly for me, working with FRN sort of was the beginning for me thinking more critically about the food system, thinking about why is there so much hunger while there's also, 40% of our food stream is being wasted at some point along the production, grocery store, to the consumer. So I think that scale of thinking critically about the food system really translates from working with FRN into any job that you'll have, incorporating either like anti-hunger work or food recovery and food waste work. And then lastly, I think some takeaways sort of from my own journey as you enter your own job search. First, I think like none of you will have a super linear path, to this like dream food recovery job. I worked with a ton of different sort of organizations that I wouldn't, think to search up when I was searching for jobs. So I think any way that you can get your foot in the door and like be doing this work that you're passionate about is a great first step. And I also think like we all come to working with Food Recovery Network for so many different reasons. I know some people are passionate about it from like a nutrition perspective, from an environmental perspective, or you could be coming to the work, of course, from an anti-hunger perspective. So I think finding what resonates with you the most from FRN and really like channeling that into your job search can be really beneficial. And then diving into your network once you sort of figure that out. So for me, I really relied on Carleton's alumni network when I was searching for jobs and looking for anyone that was involved in like any type of food work and just reaching out to them saying like, what are some other places you've worked on your way to this position? Or a lot of people working in the food space are also super connected with other people at different organizations. So I think alumni networks can be super helpful, and also diving into your personal network of anyone, previous internships or, the FRN alumni network as well. And then I also think including your experience with Food Recovery Network on your resume is super beneficial because, it's a nationally recognized organization and there's not that many people who have this student leadership experience or volunteer experience working with food recovery. So I think highlighting that and displaying it on your resume can be super beneficial. And then Tony already shouted out Good Food Jobs, but I think it's a great resource because a lot of the organizations, including we post a lot of our jobs at BFN on there, but I think a lot of the people who are posting jobs on there are very mission driven and are looking for mission driven individuals for their job listings as well. So I think that will be a super great resource. And then also just thinking creatively about the keywords you use when looking for jobs, because like food recovery is not going to pull up that many job listings, but maybe you can say like sustainability or like food systems, something like that. So I think as creative as you can get to sort of dig through jobs and find those ones that really resonate with you. And I think you'll all find amazing places. So here is my contact info. I'm happy to talk with anyone further, or if you have any questions, you can all feel free to reach out to me or sort of find out more about BFN's work as well if you're interested. So let me stop sharing my screen and then I'll hand it back over to Cassie and Julia.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Grace. Thank you for sharing your story and just a little bit about your experience with FRN. And I like your point about non-linear path, and all four of us just were head nodding. and just all the specific experience that you've had, and same for you, Tony. It's interesting to see all the different connections. And I would definitely encourage anyone on the call, even if you aren't going specifically into the anti-hunger or food recovery, food access space, your experience with FRN definitely can provide value. To Grace's point of not many people get experiences as like being student leaders, and just showcasing your experience as a student leader, organizing people, connecting with different organizations, kind of all the logistics in between, definitely can prove to be a helpful resource to showcase. So now I'm gonna go ahead and pass it over to Julia to moderate our Q&A, and I will share my screen once more for you, Julia. But yeah, you can get us started there.
Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, definitely chat them into the box or the Q&A little widget at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and I can kind of, voice your questions, and then Grace or Tony can answer any of the questions that you may have.
In the meantime, I did have a question for you, Tony, specifically while folks are getting their questions in. I'd be curious, Tony, to hear from you of what kind of stands out for you, especially as you're looking through so many applicants for the Hunger Fellowship and for roles that you may have hired for previously. What stands out for you, like within an application or someone's resume, and kind of like those key things that you look for? I know you shared that a little bit over your presentation, but for this group.
The things that I really look for is someone that has done their homework. And when I say done their homework, I've read a number of essays where the applicants have actually said, "Oh, on your blog, I saw such and such, write about," and it's like, okay, you're not just doing this because you think this would be cool, or would be a great this would be just a great thing to have on your resume. You've actually, done your experience. And for example, today, during one of the group interviews, we actually had an applicant ask us about our funders, and it was clear that she had clearly looked at the website and clearly had again done her homework. And I do the interviews. It's me along with the program associate who helps me run the program, and we both were like, we both took note of that, because it's sort of like, oh, okay, here's an applicant who went the extra step. So it's things like that. There's no one, and I guess the other thing, particularly for the Emerson program, is to talk about how, I guess to personalize your application in a way that you are talking about yourself and how the experiences it goes back to the lived experiences that really speaks to us. We've had applicants who just talk about what the programs have meant for them and their families. And so that's something that really stands out to us.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And also, just as my experience as a manager of FRN, I would say the personalizing really comes through. I can understand on the flip side of when you're applying for jobs, it's a lot to like update your cover letter to every single job that you're applying to. But that extra work, especially for the ones that you're like excited about, like spending that extra time really makes a difference on the flip side, on the like hiring end, to really see that you put in that time to connect your specific experiences to the specific role that you're seeking for.
And to that point, the easiest personalizing thing that anyone can do is to actually spend time in looking for the individual that you are sending your materials to, because to whom it may concern, no one's going to pay attention to that. But if you actually have a name there, that actually does go a long way.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Thank you, Tony.
I actually have a question for Grace. As someone who's like, this is your first like professional job really out of undergrad, I'm wondering how you have adapted to the challenges that COVID has brought on, and like how has work remote / moving to a new place during the pandemic, how's that gone for you?
Yeah, great question, Julia. Yeah, so I think pretty rare experience, but we're actually working in the office. So we have been here since I think since July. But sort of the reality of distributing food is that you have to like be in person to accept shipments and donations of food and to distribute those grocery bags. But I think for me, the thing that stood out the most is that everyone in the community, sort of be that individuals or different farms or like other organizations that we work with, everyone is sort of looking to how they can help support others in their community, or how the resources that they have, how they can help give back. So I think it's also a really big time of generosity for those who are able to, and people are really looking to forge those sort of personal connections, social connections. We've had like a huge outpouring of volunteer support and people giving their time. So I think sort of in these times of transition, going to new jobs, new places, if you are working from home, seeking out different volunteer opportunities or places where you're able to help support your community and just like get some social interaction with other people is super nice. And I've been so thankful for that. Moving to a new place, seeing sort of my coworkers every day is a really welcome consistency thing. But I think especially now, like any nonprofit in the area that you're working with, sort of a lot of places have started accepting volunteers again. And I think it's a really nice place to just interact with people and give back to your community.
And to that point, I also wanted to add, especially with the volunteering piece, it's like getting in front of these different organizations and seeing what they look like as from a volunteer perspective, and then potentially that can kind of lead you into a role as well. Thanks for sharing that, Grace. Great, then I think, Julia, if we're good, we can move along to the next portion. I know we had some other resources that we want to share, including good food jobs. We all love good food jobs. So I'll turn it back to you, Julia.
Yeah, we just have a slide here of just a couple more resources that I think are really important for FRN students specifically. Obviously, yeah, Good Food Jobs is amazing, highly recommend. They also do international jobs. So if you're looking to move somewhere outside of the US, they have food-oriented job opportunities for that as well. And then we also at FRN National, we like to use creative alignments. And so that could also be a great place where you do your job searching beyond just like LinkedIn and Glassdoor and the like more larger mainstream job opportunity sites. And then the last resource that I wanted to highlight is the FRN Alumni Network, which is an awesome group of people who are FRN student leaders who have since graduated college and have gone their many different paths, either staying within the food system field or completely going somewhere else, but still, appreciating their time at FRN and using that experience, to get a leg up in their job search and their careers. And so for anybody who is recently graduating, who is going to graduate in May, I highly suggest joining this Facebook group. We post a lot of jobs that we hear about in this group as well. And it kind of acts as like a newsletter. Like we'll post something and just be like, hey, this is something that we heard. This is a fun update from FRN National. Also, we post our own jobs there. So if you're interested in working for FRN National, then that's definitely also a place where you would find those opportunities.
Awesome. And the other couple things that I would add is around the concept of networking and looking in new places, definitely looking into different groups in your area. Like I know specifically in DC, we have an entire working group made up of many different organizations just around food recovery. And so seeing what other kind of groups like that, whether it just be like a listserv online through emails or within the community, And then other than that, FRN is actually also our Student and Alumni Advisory Board. In the coming months, we'll be posting some blog posts specifically around their experience in navigating the job world and putting FRN on their resume and what that all looks like. So definitely keep an eye out for that within our resources. So now I'll just close this out here for today with the next couple of next steps. I wanted to first thank both Grace and Tony and also Julia for spending your time here today with our audience and sharing more about your work and your experience. Our next webinar is Advancing Sustainability in Your Career, and I will kind of give a sneak peek to one of the points around one of our speakers that we'll have for that webinar is also an FRN alumni, and she specifically was able to start a food recovery program at her organization that didn't really have anything to do with food recovery. She was just an intern and saw that food was going to waste at the dining hall at the corporate campus. And so thinking about other ways, even if you aren't necessarily in the anti-hunger or food access space, you could still advance sustainability in many different ways. So if you would like to join us there, I think Julia can send the registration link in the chat. We'd love to have you. Also, please complete the webinar survey that helps improve our programming as we continue on in the next few months with additional webinars. So the link will pop up today after we're done, and then we'll also send that in the follow-up email as well. Finally, there's a couple ways to keep the conversation going. Definitely share via social media, and if you're not already on our student portal, we can get you on there and we'll continue the conversation there. And then also please share the recording with 1 or 2 of your friends or 3 of your friends that might be looking for a job as well, to share the experience and have them join us at our next one. Well, thank you so much, all of you. Appreciate your time and your energy and all of your knowledge. Thank you very much. I hope everyone has a great rest of your night.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.